of the May 8th Public Works Planning Board meeting, 6 o'clock here at the Senior Center. So our one item of business is a follow-up from the last meeting a week ago this Monday, which is the final review of the report by Pear Corporation, dated April 2017. As everybody on the board remembers, last week we postponed this final review one more week to give some of the folks in the audience or who aren't here or are here ample time to look at the red line changes. As we all know, and I think the audience knows, the vast majority of the reports have been exactly the same. We've been doing red line versions with some of the input that we've gotten from the public. And there should be really about 5 or 6 pages, I think you have them too, right there. There's about 5 or 6 pages that are at the end of the report that were redlined and a couple of other small tweaks in the report that was given to us from some feedback from the previous meeting back in March. I know we've included in the report the slides provided by some of the residents for some alternative methodologies that were also included in the report, and I believe we also put in former member Bob Bazakis's analysis in the report, so we've included those all as exhibits. So before we take final consideration of the report, I just want to ask any of the folks who are here if you had a chance to look at the changes that we put in from a week ago, and just give the opportunity, like we did last week, to give everybody an opportunity to ask questions. Really focusing again on the red line versions, I think, that was in this particular draft. Anything that was not redlined has been language and pieces of the report that have been held over from previous iterations of the report. So it's the same it's basically the same exact content. As everybody knows, each iteration we've come out with the draft report, we've put in redline versions each time so people can actually see the changes that we've put in. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. We gave everybody an extra week to take a look at the report and really had any questions, again, specifically on the red line parts. Michael?
You go first.
Do you want to go?
No rush.
Up to you.
No, I mean, so can I'd like to submit this for the record.
Sure.
To be included in the minutes. So I'll take you through this just fairly quickly.
Is this on the red line portion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So
That was the half, yeah.
I think it is.
All right.
So we'll go through. I won't.
Is this,
you can read it.
Does this have anything that, I'm just clarifying, just for ease of time, does this have anything, is this an addendum or an amendment to the slides that you've already provided?
Yes.
Okay, so this is in addition to the stuff you've already provided?
Correct.
We have 2 extra copies up here. Does anybody need a copy?
So again, you can read this. I'll take you through it quickly, though. So first, in the conclusions, the conclusion states that 15 screening variations are presented, and I think this is somewhat not accurate and misleading. There were actually 5 weighted screens that were run. The 15, we come up to the 15 because they will each run three times, changing the rating methodology.
Could I interrupt just briefly? Could you ask for that to be read into what you're saying to be read into the minutes?
I think, yes.
Yes.
I also should just make note that I actually just reminded myself to state publicly, tonight's meeting is being recorded by Sam. So all the comments, I think I might be obligated to say that now that I think about it, that we are being recorded. I know most meetings in town it's matter of fact, there's always cameras, Sam is always present, but not to mistake it for putting this in the record, and I'm happy to put this in the report, in addition to Mike's slides.
Okay.
Happy to do that. I didn't want to make it seem like I was saying no to this, but okay to say, So we're happy to do that.
Thank you very much.
So do you want them in the minutes as well?
Sure.
Could you send me in the?
I'll send you electronic. So anyway, I think the conclusion, when it presents 15 screenings were considered, and I think it said 12 out of the 15 lean toward Fairview Hill. Again, I think that's, I don't think it's accurate, and I think it's misleading, because there's actually just 5 weighted screens that were run. The base plus 4 variations. And the 15 were run because the residents provided input on the rating methodology of each criteria. There was inconsistency, and we were seeking for some level of inconsistency, particularly with Ravi, a scaled approach, which the report did on the third. I think it was the third series of runs. I think in the appendix there, there's 15 or so. So again, I think it's not accurate that 15 were running, and it gives the impression that 13 out of 15. And quite frankly, when you rerun the weighting, and you use the last set of rated criteria that PAR used, where they used a scaled approach for all it comes out that Fairview is top score in 3 and Park Central is 2.
Okay.
Okay, so 3 out of 5 is not as compelling as 12 out of 15.
Okay.
So again, I think it's misleading, and I think it should be corrected. That would be my input. So in terms of screenings, again, the report did not address, while it included in the appendix the 5, I provided 5 alternative screens, equally viable. They could have been looked at, could have been considered, and the report did not address those in any meaningful way. They were included in the appendix, but they didn't appear to be factored into the decision making. So,
I want to introduce folks who may watch this at home. This is Tim, our consultant. He told us that he would be here at 6:06 according to Google Maps and Waze, and Google Maps yet again doesn't fail. 6:06 right on the spot. Nice job.
Tardiness.
so if you flip to page 3 there, again, just to,
Thanks, Mike, can I,
Sure.
if I might? Just give you a chance to get started on this one. If you, briefly, just
yeah.
get Tim up to speed on what your concerns were with the screenings. I just want you to hear this.
Okay. Sure.
So Tim, in the conclusion states that 12 out of 15 screens were run.
Yep.
And my concern is that the 15 is somewhat misleading. There's actually only 5 weighted screens. They were each run 3 times with different scaling of the, okay, so to present it as 15 different screens, again, I don't think it's accurate. I think the report should choose one rating methodology.
Well, I think we did choose the one rating methodology originally, and then
Right.
you guys had some changes,
Right.
or you brought, so that was how Tim addressed it, was that we put it in an attachment that this, because we screened it, when Tim came and he screened it with the group, there was no bias intended, so basically he said, okay, what do you think is more important, and then did it versus, so no one kind of knew what was going to happen or what really,
Right.
how the tool was going to work. I mean, then adjusting it and putting it in, and it's not that it's called out and it is shown as,
Right.
as an appendix, but it's not part of PAR's work, that was different work. So it's an appendix versus being part of the report.
Right, but the base report, the 5 screens that were presented in the base report still have the inconsistencies in the scaling, the ratings. So again, our input was to address that, and it's okay to present the 5 screens, but present them with standard scaling that you did in kind of the third scenario.
Sure.
So quite frankly, I think it's buried in the appendix. Anybody reading this, short of this group, probably is not going to see that. And again, I think it's misleading If you read nothing but the conclusion, you're gonna see, well, 12 out of 15. It's pretty compelling, but it's really not 12 out of
Let's
15.
give him an opportunity to address that.
Sure.
I think I understand what you're getting at. You know, the intent with the way like Karen mentioned, we presented it 5 ways, you know, 5 different screening mechanisms, the way we felt as we met collectively as a group that it was a fair way to screen it. We made 2 variations of those 5 screening methods and thought, in fairness, we would present all 15 of them in the back of as an appendix. And that's how it's presented. You know, we have 15 different variations on the screening. And I mean, it's presented that way. We have 15 different variations.
But it's not,
But you could do more variations.
you got 5
Right.
5 basic ways, 5 screens. What changes is how you
That's right.
scale it.
Right.
That's right, because
So,
Michael, as we've explained before numerous times at these meetings, everybody's going to have to some degree, you know, trying to attempt to solve the problem. Different people may weight the importance of those factors a little bit different, right?
see-
And
but see-
let me just finish.
yeah,
Okay, you know, I mean, at some point, I also believe we're going to have to agree to disagree. I mean, you can go into this thinking, well, if I'm a water ratepayer in this town, the most important thing to me may be cost,
right.
okay? If I don't live up in this neighborhood, okay, the most important thing to me is fire suppression and public safety and cost. Okay, those 2.
Right,
Can you
but
finish?
I'm not,
Can I?
this first, no, we can.
I mean, I just say that because I think out of the 15 scenarios, as we've said at many meetings, you could move those numbers around, and the intent was to try to give some alternative ideas, because even on this committee, we had debate about what were the most important factors, what are the most pressing problems to solve. And even on this committee, we had some difference of opinions on what the most important factors were. And so Carl went back and I think tried to represent that in the report. And there's citations throughout. I have to be honest. I mean, if somebody goes and looks at the report and they read through just the first 15 pages and they don't go through the rest of the report, I don't know what to say about that.
But I think you're missing my point. This
okay.
page 2
Yep.
is not about changing no, not that one.
Not this.
My point about the 15, on page 2. What you were just describing is the weightings,
Right.
40% for cost, 20% for the other things. Okay, I'm not talking about, page 2 is all about, there's 5 screenings. And not arguing that that's your choice on how to present.
Okay.
But they were each run 3 different times because there's inconsistency in the scaling that the residents brought up. So my only point is, the inconsistencies were addressed, a scaled approach was run on the 5 screens, and I would recommend that you just present that the conclusion just state that out of the 5 screens that were run, it's not 12 out of 15, it's 3 out of 5 point to Fairview Hill, and 2 out of 3 point to Park Center. So I'm not arguing the 40% the cost or 20% of this. That's not what page 2 is about.
Okay, thank you.
Page 3 is more about the point you were just on. And I agree, you can change the weightings any different way. So my only point of page 3, which I presented previously, but I don't feel it was addressed in any meaningful way in the report. It is in the appendix. But there's 5 equally viable screens, and we've seen this before. 1 to 5 is what PAR did with the kind of the equal scaling. 6 to 10 are equally viable screens that could point, and again, you can see what happens here. You can make, my only point is you can make just an equally viable case for Park Central. And again, we've been through that, so we don't have to go through it. But I don't think it was addressed in any meaningful way.
You don't want it lost.
Yeah, I don't want it lost. The next page, again, we've shown this before. Again, the reason I'm presenting it here is because, again, I don't think it was presented, included in the report. Last time we saw this, we requested that the report should provide a direct comparison of Fairview Hill and Park Central. The report, again, I don't think the report provides that, again, in any meaningful way. It is in the appendix, but it doesn't appear to be in the body or in the conclusion anywhere. So, just point of record. Next page, the conclusions. Again, this is just a comment. You don't have to reply to it. But, you know, the conclusion does recognize or acknowledges the impact on residential property, quality of life, states that there are important considerations that should be considered. The conclusion goes on to state that when the town does ultimately make the decision, the town should consider non-technical aspects, such as quality of life and possible property impact. So my only comment here is that, again, that's in the conclusion, which is good. You know, I think we support that being in the conclusion, but, you know, I just find it, somewhat, you know, that the report is lacking in that, you know, on one hand, it recommends A and B, which are in the residential area. On the other hand, it states that residential impact should be taken into account, but then it makes no attempt to present a recommendation that would balance those two things. So again, you don't have to answer, just a comment. We've been through that. So, and then the last page, a couple other items. I do, again, I'll come back to fire flow at Trotter because it's brought up a number of times in the report. And Mr. Bertnazzi, you had requested that the, you know, one of the last meetings, you know, Tim, you had said that there's piping solutions that could address that. And again, if this is going to be part of a master plan, I would think there'd at least be some, you know, inclusion of that to be considered. Not that you have to do it, but there should be some discussion of it in there. And then the last point, this is a redlined option. I did notice that there's a comment that the Park Central high elevation is located in Westborough. That seems to be new to the report. Again, I would question that. If you look at a USGS map, it doesn't appear to support that. So maybe you can comment on that, where that came from, because it was presented as a disadvantage to the Park Central option.
Like, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, that's the parcel that is currently not planned.
No, what?
Not planned to have anything on it right now.
Right.
So,
I have a map. Do you want to look at the map?
no, I don't. At this point,
But
it's that a lot of the parcel is in Westborough. I mean, there's a corner that would be the piece. So what is actually going to be the parcel that we get is Westborough parcel.
So it's not necessarily the highest, it just happens to be the one.
I think it's both.
It's the point, it's the point that is the one that they've been showing
Sure, Michael.
for years.
Go ahead.
I'm just for clarification.
If you want to give us the map, we'll take it for the record.
No, maybe you can point out the piece of land we're talking about. So there's the town, there's the interchange, there's the town line.
The town line is this right there.
You can have a contour show that as the height point.
This is the highest available to us.
Yeah, I think
But you're right on the highway there.
Yeah.
But again,
okay, so
I'm
I
trying
think
to.
that this is one of those issues that anyone could see it as a pro and a con. Right? I mean, truthfully, the parcel first of all, we don't own the land, first and outright.
Yeah, I get
So
it.
that's a hiccup in and of itself. If it's in Westboro, I would entirely hope that the town of Westboro would help expedite the site, allow us to do it. If that was the chosen spot, we'd have to go to a site plan review in the town of Westboro. And generally, these things are exempt from local zoning, so there really wouldn't probably be too much of a problem there. But again, I just want to take this back out 30,000 feet. That's not really what we were asked to do, was to get into that level of detail about all of the logistics and specifics about whether it would be a permitting issue in the town of Westboro.
Yeah, my only comment is that we've met 2 or 3 times,
Yeah.
we've talked about that parcel, and all of a sudden in the red line report this time around,
Right, all right, let me explain how that happened, because afterwards I said, gee, after that last meeting, I said, we actually, to Tim, this group has talked about it when we did our original, when they did when we first met about it, we did those screenings and stuff, and I said, well, it's technically, I think what's available is gonna be in Westboro. And then I said, you know what, with all the discussions we've had, that we've never actually brought up the fact, and we should probably put it in. So that's all. It was something that it was that we realized it hadn't been in there, and that people were going to say, oh, we didn't know. But in the meantime, we're not allowed to negotiate for it.
Than it would be in 9 months when when you get to the Board of Selectmen and the Selectmen go, or somebody on the Board of Selectmen says, I had no idea that land was in Westboro.
sure.
So I just thought that, while we had the opportunity, we put it in as a red line so that the folks here that were most interested in this, at least at this juncture, were at least aware of that. And more importantly, or just as importantly, when we forward the report up to the selectmen, when the selectmen do their time and read through the 80 pages or through the whole report, they would see that the piece of land that they are requesting, presumably they would know that anyway, the piece of land that they're potentially requesting, that we're recommending that they request to do their due diligence, they would at least know that it's in another community. Because from a permitting perspective, you don't get to just go build a water tank on someone else's town land. Even if you own it, you've got to go through their rules and their site plan review.
Yeah, I get it. It's presented as a disadvantage.
Right.
Maybe.
Well, we had to find a way to bring it up.
Yeah, I guess, but you could.
Well,
Put it as an advantage.
No, you could just make a note, footnote.
It depends on who, and also I think it depends on who you are as to how you perceive whether it's an advantage or a disadvantage.
I'm just making a comment.
So,
Personally, I don't think that the town line on that USGS map, I would question, so.
Also, just to keep in mind, if the town were to acquire a parcel for a water tank up at the Park Central and they did negotiate that with the developer, there would be, her department or somebody would be contracted out to go do all of the work relative to the property boundaries and delineating a deed and a purchase and sale process. So, those factors could be considered into that piece as well. In fact, that point in the report may actually suggest to maybe our local officials in the upper chamber that maybe they want to look for a different parcel of land. We're not beholden, I think, to that particular piece. I think, though, that because of the geography of it, as well as we don't own it, there's just other factors that are going to go into it. So I think it's just mainly in there for a reference point so that the selectmen and the manager, town manager at least understand that that's a factor that they have to consider.
Your call.
Yeah.
Just
No, but your comments
up.
are duly noted, Mike, and they're
So,
going to be the meeting.
you wanted to know how you asked us how it got in there, but that's how.
Yeah, no, again, we don't have to, I appreciate that. I'm just making.
Yeah, may I ask a question? I'm not sure what actually transpired there, so have you established whether it's in Southborough or Westborough? We don't know at this point, the highest point.
No,
The thing is, we don't have.
We're not doing that.
Right.
We're not
So-
declaring what's the highest, what exactly piece of land the selectmen should go
The piece,
try to acquire.
The piece
I'm just
that
referring to the
currently
statement
is
of the report.
available, that because there's been no negotiation or anything, but the piece that when, at the ZBA, we said, geez, this is a site that was identified from the tank siting report where they looked at 28 spots back in 2008, which we did because of actually this group who had wanted that. That site was identified, and the space on that Park Central site currently that isn't planned for use that's still at the high point is in Westboro. So
And
it's
that-
high and it's over the line.
And
So it's just, it doesn't mean that if Park Central doesn't get built, if that whole thing falls first and somebody else comes and they're like, yeah, we'll give you the land, it might be a whole different spot. So it doesn't, it's right now, that's the piece that where I'm saying this is where it would probably be because of the fact that we have through ZBA at the existing Park Central plan as it is, which has like a nursing home kind of on top of that.
Yeah, again, I would just, again, looking at the boundary on the map, looking at the contours and looking at that hill, I think a vast majority of that parcel is in Southborough.
It
Okay.
is.
But just because that part,
We only have an acre of it that might be claimed by us.
Even a vast majority of an acre, looking
but
at
we
where-
don't own any of the land.
I get it.
So I
we
just
don't-
want to make sure that's clear because that's a huge factor in this. Even if the highest point were available, the developer may not want to, or the landowner may not want to sell it to the town.
Sure.
We may not get the prime piece of real estate that we want to solve this issue. I mean, I'm mentioning that as factors because we can't just go, oh, there's the highest point, there's where we're going to get the tank, there's where the tank's going to go. And I think what Karen and Tim have worked off of, correct me if I'm wrong, is this discussion of a potential tank going up in that neighborhood for some time. I think we identified the spot that has been conceptually, I don't know if it's been formally, or at least conceptually has been discussed among the town's leaders and the landowner to say, okay, over there would be a spot that I, as the landowner, would be at least willing to negotiate with the town to, and
Are you saying that happened or that didn't happen?
I have no idea. I think it's just, this kind of came to us in this level, so it's a good
Right,
question.
through the ZBA process, I said, geez, this is something that just has been identified and we have to look. And so the proponent for the Park Central said, this is the plan, this would be what was available. But there's no there's been no negotiation, there's nothing beyond the fact that that would be the area available. We had the same issue when we had looked at EMC back in the day. They had a plan for buildings on all those hills. Now, EMC, who knows if it's even ever going to get built. So it all kind of is that same thing, but that was all stuff through the tank siting plan way back in 2008 that came up with those sites. And the Park Central area was denoted as a spot, but then we had to say, all right, well, based on this plan, if something were coming available, it would have to be somewhere that wasn't designated for a building.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it said by you at one point that space for a water tank had been offered by the Park Central
Yes,
developer
as part,
to the town?
through the ZBA, it was.
Is that in Westboro or Southborough?
Yes, it's where there's no building, so it's right on the Westboro. I mean, I believe there's maybe a corner of it's in Southborough, but it was
So
in
he
Westboro.
owns that, he owns a piece of Westboro too, and he
Yes.
could put a tank on either place.
We can put a tank wherever the land was negotiated to have. So right now, since he's showing something and there's been no negotiation official of where the actual parcel is, it's not in Southborough, it's in Westboro because he doesn't have a building in there.
So I'm a little confused that there were 28 possible sites for tanks, and that was probably done before.
No, you were here for that. You
No.
guys, this was all.
It was a long time ago, but that was before Park Central was even in the picture.
No, it was, at the time it was not Park Central, it was Flatley Land, we kept calling it Flatley Land.
Right, but he didn't have a development to go in there, did he?
Flatley did not, and what happened is the selectmen had sent letters to the owners as they changed hands, because I believe Kevin Giblin owned it at one point.
Yep.
And it was Trammell Crow.
Yep.
And it would say, it's been identified that there might be land on that property. Would you be willing? Yep, when we know what we're doing, we'll talk to you. When we know what we're doing, we'll talk to you. So the reason this even came up again was that it came up through the ZBA process, that we had said, okay, this has been identified, the selectmen have sent a note to the owner. The property at that point, it was going through the process, and we needed to see, okay, is this a viable tank site still? What are we looking at for costs and stuff as the property, if it was going to get, if Park Central was going to get permitted, which it was at the time, so I didn't bring it up until we were sure we were kind of going through with that process of permitting. At that point, we said, all right, now we need to analyze the site and make sure it's a good site so that the selectmen can figure out what they're going
Okay, now
into.
I was under the impression that this extra water pressure and so on was necessary because of the build out of Park Central.
No, see, that is incorrect.
Yep.
So the plan, Park Central paid already to have their water, it looked at of their site as it pertains to our water system. And as part of that analysis came back to say, you're gonna have to put in your own booster pump, you're gonna have to do this work. You have plenty of flow to that site, there's plenty of flow because it's a direct connection, because it's right
There
near
is
the Tara
now,
tank.
in other words.
Currently.
But they built it
Yeah,
today,
they have
they
plenty.
water
They
flow.
don't have a lot of pressure because they're actually higher than most of than the spots on Tara. Because 450 is what we're set for. Our whole system is designed at 450 as an elevation.
Right.
And that's from back in the 50s. So what happened is that's our design level. There's spots that are higher. They have every intention of building a booster pump and a set of piping to actually boost the pressure up into their
But
neighborhood.
the actual demand for water is not going to put any kind of a stress on the current town water system?
Everything that's built in the town
Mhm.
is pulling more water and then creating less of storage. Is that a
That's
good way to
correct,
put
yep.
it?
Is storage the same thing as pressure?
No.
So, in other words, so you won't have enough fire storage if we don't put another tank up? What's
So
happening?
about 8 years ago, we did the master plan, and consultants did master plans for the town prior to our involvement. And what all the master plans do is they look at full build out. They project what, because water use keeps going up year over year in town. Demand is going up, build out is occurring, we're adding demand every year to the system. So what we do is we make a projection about what future demand is going to be. And then we look at how much of a deficit in total storage we're going to have. And that's how we came up with the number, the amount of storage that we need.
Why is it a storage problem? Why is there a storage problem when we're sitting right on top of MWRA? Tunnel going into Boston full of water.
Again, it has entirely to do with how this system operates, how every system operates. Well, I should say most systems. It's a balance between pumping and storage. You can't have too much storage, you can't have too much pumping, and conversely, you don't want to have too little pumping and too little storage. You have to balance the two, and it's just the way that this system runs. This is what we call a gravity system, which means that we pump out of MWRA into storage tanks, and then those storage tanks feed the system.
And the trigger to pump is always in a computer that says the tank needs more pressure for more storage.
It needs more water. The tank has dropped a certain amount, the pumps turn on to fill back up, it fills up, and the pumps turn off.
And that system is,
That's a usable storage.
So the usable piece of it is the piece that, so as the water level in the tank drains, right, pressure goes down. Once we get to a certain threshold, we start to drop pressure below what's considered reasonable, acceptable. And once we get into that range, that's what we consider unusable. Everything above that is usable.
so is there any other
But usable
questions?
for fire.
But
I
it's
know-
still usable for fire.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I know you had your hand up from
So-
earlier in the...
I am speaking to something specifically on the residential impact. I appreciate the fact that you identified that as an item for consideration. I guess, and this may fall in the category of questioning the value of leaving something out, and we may, to use your term, agree to disagree. The engineering study is very detailed. We talk about flow rate, storage, ISO. I think that the elephant in the room is us. And you know, when I did my own research as far as how do municipalities look at things like this, the term that came up that's not even in the report is visual blight. So I think that the engineering report you've done is comprehensive but not complete. My recommendation, which can be totally ignored, but if you can put, you know, at least what one person commented, is that a continued study needs to be done to assess the various neighborhoods, how many houses will see this this tank, and actually have a weighting method where, in addition to the items that you have there, where you put, you know, this is weighted at 5, this is weighted at 4, that you have a visual and kind of a neighborhood visual blight, for want of a better term, impact weighting that also gets factored in. Again, those are my thoughts and what I would like you to make note of.
It's a great point.
Right, and I do
I will
think it needs to come into play when they go to someday decide that they're gonna do a tank.
Right.
Isn't that kind of?
Well, that's a very good point.
It's
Well, let me just
part of an engineering study.
let me
would
just
be my
let me
comment.
just finish and just explain the rationale as to why in the conclusion we wrote in there the reference to the visual modeling and the appraiser. I don't think anyone on this board denies that the elephant in the room would be the neighborhood feedback of simply not wanting a water tank near their house for the visual blight. It's a pretty good term. The hard part is that's not why we hired him. And also that wasn't really in our charge, if you will, or directed from the selectmen. So I think to kind of compromise, if you will, that's why we put in there the statement of the suggestion based on the technical expertise of the consultant saying, you know, there are these visual models that have been done. I know some 10 years ago there was the balloon study that was done where the balloons were put up to kind of generally give a guide of, you know, it was going to be about 5 feet over tree line. So that would reduce a lot. So that would reduce, you know, at least some concerns on the shadowing because it wasn't, you know, I think depending on, you know, you've seen in the report too, there's tons of different types of tanks. And so sometimes you could think, some people could think it's going to be this thing that's a mile high in the air. And sometimes, you know, you go over to the Terra Road tank and if you didn't know it was there, you probably wouldn't know it was there. You'd just think it was a driveway going to another house. And so I think what the suggestion of the committee was, and the consultant, was to try to just make that reference known, so we're doing our due diligence and honor to the residents that are concerned about that. But also recognizing that this is as much as it is a serious issue for many of your concerns, it's also a very serious issue for municipalities to get into the business of quantifying lost property value because of a municipal purpose. People could feel like they might want a sidewalk on their road, and some people don't want a sidewalk on their road. 3 feet into the public way, the town has the right to maybe take a tree out that's going to be dangerous. Someone may feel that they're grieved because now their property value has been lost because of a tree. I'm now going to be right next to a public safety building, and now there's going to be ambulances going off. That's something that somebody... But at some point, it's a very difficult conversation, and it's a very inexact science. It's really more of an art form. To try to really get at, if a tank were to be built, what really is really the value of your property that may or may not be lost? And that's going to differ for probably every single person who's in this room, depending on where you live. As I've stated before, nobody in this room is going to probably see the tank, or very few people, I should say, as much as a couple people that are here that live that are a direct abutter to it. Well, see, but hold on, let me finish. This is, again, why we're putting this into that portion of the report like that. If the selectmen want to go spend money to hire an appraiser to go through this analysis before making a final decision of what to put before the voters at town meeting, that's their decision to make. That's not our decision to make. And furthermore, that's a very expensive proposition that has other consequences associated with it. That's why we kind of got at the visual modeling concept, kind of like the balloons 10 years ago, that might give an idea to some residents of what this might look like from their, front stoop or their driveway or whatever. So that's kind of why we put it in there like that, is really giving the selectmen the knowledge to be able to say that, because I don't think we have the bandwidth to really go into a full depth appraisal of that.
So I
So,
appreciate that. I guess I'll just go on record that I disagree with that. I understand what you've described, but I disagree with the decision to not have a more comprehensive engineering aspect related to the properties and who would see it and such.
okay, thank you.
Robbie has a point.
Robbie?
Yeah, I just want to say, so with all due respect, so yes, it's not possible to say what negative impact it would have on a particular individual's property, but I mean, it is a no-brainer that it will have a negative impact. It took me a 30-second search on Google to find forums on real estate from my professional real estate agents who say that a water tank in the neighborhood definitely will have a negative impact. So this is probably the more likely scenario. So it is not like it's not a mere apprehension or a worry that we have, or a phobia, which is like a irrational fear. So, and I have some copies here that you can take a look at. This is from Zillow. I'm sorry, I only have 5 copies of
That's
each.
fine.
That's okay.
Can I just, I can send it by email.
No, we believe it.
So this is from.
I don't think anyone's disagreeing that that'd be the case. It's just that I think really what this committee's trying to say is, look, when the time comes, so they've got to vote that, yeah, we think it's a sound report. There's a lot of concerns we feel are included in the report. The residents' concerns around the Fairview site. Obviously, nothing's included around the Park Central site, but the idea was, is Park Central viable? Should the selectmen still look at it? And then, is this report
I'm not sure what
Robbie,
you agreed to just now. Are you agreeing that it will have a negative impact on property values is the most likely scenario? That's the point I was trying to make.
I'm not making any comment on any particular person's property about whether it's going to have a negative.
No, generally speaking. What
No, I'm not making any comment on that.
You're not willing to.
I'm not. No, I can't make a comment on
Okay,
personal
so
property.
please take a look at the information that I provided for free, basically.
Okay. No, I appreciate it.
Good.
Any
Well,
other
actually,
just
this
comments?
young lady's
Okay.
had a question for quite a
I
while.
think the question is when you're looking at the impact financially on each of the proposals, there is a definite impact financially on Fairview, which you are not experiencing on the site at Park Central, because there's no development there now. And I think what they're trying to say, which I agree with wholeheartedly, is that those figures, those numbers, should be part of the total package of what it's going to cost the town.
Right.
Because it is going to be a financial burden. Another piece of the puzzle, if you're looking at the whole puzzle, it only stands to reason that the entire financial picture needs to be expressed to the town, not just what you think that is or is not going to happen, because there is going to be a financial impact.
And all I'm simply trying to reiterate, as I've said many times before, that's not our decision to make.
Well, no,
But
but when
no, it's not my decision, and I was not asked for this board's opinion to put into the model the quantifying exactly how much property value your house would lose, his house would lose, her house would lose. I'm just suggesting that is a decision I am highly uncomfortable putting into an extensive report and quantifying down to the dollar exactly how much money each person's property is going to be, property value be lost. At some point, I'm not disagreeing that could not be a part of the overall look at it. It very well could be. I'm just suggesting that is a board of selectmen purview, because the consequences of making that decision are far more reaching than just this project in this neighborhood, or, by the way, for the people who do live over in Park Central already, over on Tara Road in that entire neighborhood. There was an option in here about getting rid of that tank and putting up a much larger tank. Well, that also too could have property impacts. Building a public safety complex can have property impacts. Building a sidewalk can have negative or positive impacts. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into this. I'm not going to sit here and say that any of you in this room should not be concerned about that. I'm just suggesting that is not the point of this study, and I apologize, but at some point, we're not going to agree, I don't think, on that particular point, which is why I've referenced it to this gentleman's question. I've referenced it, an option to reference it in the conclusion part of the suggestion of the report, that if the selectmen want to take a look at that they are more than happy to take a look at both of those issues, the visual modeling, the property appraisals, the concerns that many of you had. All of your concerns, I think, also are pretty adequately addressed in here. We've put in the residential issue of property values in here in several places. I'm going to also guess that many of the residents in your neighborhood or in Park Central, wherever a new tank would go, are going to show up and express many of the same concerns. And so this is going to be something that is going to continue in the conversation down the line, regardless of whether it's over in the Fairview neighborhood or whether it's over in Park Central. I just think that that's probably going to be a part of the conversation that's going to happen down the road, regardless of the chosen site.
So if I could,
when the number is presented, people tend to look at the number, and they tend to say, well, this particular proposal is going to cost us less money than this proposal. Not knowing and putting that in as a factor, you as a board chose what factors to give weighted value to. And that was not given any weighted value, whereas at Park Central right now, maybe Tara will have an impact. I certainly don't want anybody's, but they may have an impact. But I don't think it is as devastating as an already built development, an already built neighborhood. And
Well, and
there's
I-
no,
Okay.
there's,
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I said sorry because I was interrupting.
And because you're looking, there are many people who look at the bottom line number and say, this is only going to cost us X number of dollars. And this is only, and I mean, if you really look at the report, the water storage that you get on Park Central is greater than you're gonna get on
Right.
Fairview. Now, the whole idea to do this was storage. So you're getting more storage on another site, and you're not impacting residents. But people tend to look at what they want. Do they want to sit down and read 80 pages like we have all done? Probably not. And what they're going to look at is the number, and they're going to look at, this is going to be cheaper. Are they going to look at the storage? Who knows? But you, as a board, chose what those options would be to wait. And that was one that you chose not to wait.
Because I can't, I'll emphasize it one more time, just to be on the record. There's no methodology that I'm generally familiar with that is going to accurately come close to quantifying the cost of what you're discussing.
Well, and-
It's just, it is, as I was explaining to the gentleman, I think at the last meeting too, there are just dozens, if not hundreds of factors that go into this. That go into property valuation. It's not it is part science, it is part art. Go up to the Board of Assessors office and talk to them about this issue. It's not something that you could just quantify very easily. That would, I think even help educate the public, because that's going to be a number that's going to fluctuate constantly depending on market forces and a lot of other factors that just are out of our control. And also, as we've talked at these meetings before, and I've pressed Tim quite a bit on this, one of the things I've struggled with is, when exactly is the point at which this a storage tank needs to happen? Is it 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? There's an imperfect science to that too. So, 10 years from now, the property value discussion could be a completely different conversation than it is right today, or that it is in 3 years or 5 years. There's lots of other market economic forces out there. We could go into another recession, a housing bubble, and there's a lot of different factors that go into this. It's just an impossible thing to try to ask us or ask another consultant to go out and do something like that.
Because
Let me
this is really a planning tool, and I feel as though people feel like this report, if it's accepted, everyone's going to be like, we're building a tank on Fairview, we're going for the money next year. And I know we talked, Mr. Horgan asked about it last meeting. We don't have the next phase of the water system right now, the next thing we're doing is a water system master plan. We have to update the plan. We're going to update the plan. At that point, we look at the improvements we've done, which we all agreed back in 2008. We're going to do some other improvements because the comments from this group at that time were also that, geez, we have other improvements we haven't done that are in the master plan. Why do we need the tank? Let's see what else we can do. So we've done a lot of those. We're now reassessing. It's going to be at least a year process to reassess, look at that. We'll have public meetings about that. And it still isn't that we're going to be looking at a tank the year after. So I just want to be clear that we don't know, we don't know what's actually gonna happen, and the cost associated with it might be very different. When we bought the land when we got the land at Tara, where the Tara tank is, in 61, that was built as part of that development going in, right? Now, in the meantime, in 78, when we bought the Fairview Hills site, there was nothing built there, and then the stuff got built, and we didn't have the money for the tank. That doesn't mean that might not be the same process. We might end up with a Park Central site, we still have the Fairview Hill, and then everything's built and no one wants a tank in either spot. So it's just, it will have to be all the way
Hold on,
reevaluated.
I just want to make sure we're having people.
Right. It's all gonna have to be reassessed, reevaluated, recalculated. The estimates are gonna have to be redone at that time.
And I just want to make one more quick point on to her question, which is, if I'm looking at this study like we've looked at for the entire community in the high service area, okay? If this tank were to have been built back in 1999 when the decision was first made, really, that this tank was needed, this tank would cost about a quarter of what it would cost today. Okay? And I make that an important point because that was 17, 18 years ago. Costs of construction have clearly gone on something like this through the roof.
Right.
So when we look at apples to apples, or we're trying to sit there and say, well, what's the real cost behind of all this? Okay? There is a responsibility from this board and from the Board of Selectmen, I would hope, I'm not going to speak for them, that they would be looking at the totality of the cost, because in 17 years from now, I can all but assure you the cost of this tank, whether it's in Park Central or whether it's over here or we find another magic mountain somewhere, is going to be probably double the cost of what it is today. So there's just another factor out there to explain, to help educate that we don't, whether this goes forward in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15, the costs are going to have to be reallocated and recalculated at that point anyway. So I just throw that out there to be a little cautious on the property dog. So
I guess one
go ahead, one last
comment
question.
on that, and
Yeah.
this will be my last comment for the evening. I'll give everyone else a chance, and that is, one interpretation would be that because you have so many unknowns with having an established neighborhood versus a non-established location, one approach would be that, gee, since it's so difficult to assess that, we won't factor that in. Another equally valuable way to look at it would be to say, since so many homes and neighborhood people are impacted, it's such an incalculable value that we shouldn't even touch that location as a site for the tank.
Good question. This isn't a bureaucratic problem. This is a Mother Nature problem. Okay? That site over in your neighborhood, there's not much I can do about the fact that that is a very, very high point, if not one of the highest points in town. That's not government bureaucrats making things up and steering policies in the direction. There's just a big hill over there. And water pressure, one of the main features to get water pressure to put out fires for public safety, for emergency storage, and for the water that we use in our faucets every single day in our showers, in our sinks. At some point, you need a high point to make the system work. So, I don't know how else to answer that, but it's not. At some point, it's not a public policy or bureaucratic issue. It's just a fact of how Mother Nature created the land and where those spots are. I would love it if I could find another spot in town, and Tim would. I think everybody would love it if we could find another spot in town that didn't have neighbor dissent or neighborhood dissent.
So,
and
Jamie.
Yeah.
Jamie.
Let the people talk a little bit, would you?
okay,
I
sure.
my hand up.
You got about 5 minutes because I got to leave at 7.
5
So-
minutes, you've taken
so-
up most of the evening.
Well, I said that last. No, I haven't.
Yes, you had.
So Jamie,
Okay.
just on your last comment, there is another high spot in town. That's
Park
not,
Central.
That's not in a residential neighborhood, and it's higher than Fairview Hill.
Right.
So it's not like it doesn't exist. It's there.
Right, we've never disagreed that
No,
the
no,
other site
so-
doesn't
so-
exist.
yeah,
We're
let me-
recommending to the selectmen to do their diligence to look at that site over there.
Let me use the 5 minutes.
Well, no, because she has a question too.
So
No,
let
he
me-
can go first.
So
certainly.
just last comment. I don't know why the report, last week you described that you're gonna vote on the report, but you're also gonna send a letter, a separate letter to the selectmen?
Yeah.
Is that what I understand? Recommending
Well,
that-
I sent a cover letter with,
Right.
you know,
Right.
every chair of every
Right.
committee sends a
But
cover letter.
why
with-
wouldn't, given all we're talking about, the opportunity that Park Central provides, we just talked about potentially, like, if that tank at Fairview was built when the neighborhood was built, like Tara was built when the neighborhood was built, there's an opportunity at Park Central to potentially...
We're not disagreeing with you.
No, I know, but why wouldn't the report, my point is, why wouldn't the report, in the conclusion, at least present that as something to pursue? Not that it's, again, it's
It
dependent on...
doesn't deny pursuing it, it
Well,
doesn't stop it, and actually
No,
that's
but it
what
doesn't,
they're
it
voting.
doesn't, sorry, Karen, it doesn't state it.
Yeah.
But
There'll be a
that's-
record, Mike. I'm going to assure you right now, and I'm saying it right on camera, and I'm going to say it to you as I've said every single meeting we've had. I am going to, no, you haven't maybe attended all of them, but I'm going to say it again because this committee, okay, and when Mr. Brzakis was here too, my fine colleagues on this board made it clear 2 meetings ago that due to the resident feedback, despite the methodology that was used in the report and what the science might show, okay, in terms of physics, that Fairview site might be the better spot for this. We are going to recommend to the selectmen that they do their due diligence because, again, this is in litigation. I'm not getting involved in that, okay? This isn't something I can anticipate they're going to deal with soon. So I'm just saying we are going to make, I'm going to, you know, that is going to be our recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for them to do their due diligence to do exactly what you just said.
Right, so
They are going to call up the developer however they see fit, whenever they see fit, whatever's in their infinite wisdom, and they are going to see if that site over there, okay, is something that during this litigious environment and during their negotiations with Mr. DePietri, if they can come up with a solution to exactly what you just stated, then I think everybody will be happier, including most of the residents here. But Mike, I'm going to be blunt. I can't go any more further than that.
No, no, and that's good, that's good.
That's as straightforward as I can be.
That's good, my only point is,
I mean,
that's
I'm
good.
going to sign a letter that says,
I get
you
it,
know,
you just hope that it doesn't get lost in the record 5 years from now when someone pulls out the report.
If-
I would feel much more comfortable that that letter is probably either an appendix in the report or in
That's
the
fine.
report.
That's fine.
I'm just,
That's fine.
the way
That's fine.
things,
We can do that.
you and I
Okay.
cannot be, 10 years
we
from
can do
now,
that.
we may not be here.
We can do that.
When we come
So-
back for the third time in the period.
Yep.
Just quickly, and just for the record, I would like to say that in 2008, when the Fairview Hill issue came up, we always supported and we worked with the people who lived around the Tara tank. We supported each other and we worked together to make sure that both neighborhoods were preserved, and we will do it again.
Okay.
All right, and the other part is that I looked up how many houses there are in the area of Fairview. There's 36 family residences on Sarsonstone and Schuyler, 7 on Deerfoot Road Extension, and 15 on Summit that are near, which gives us more than 40 homes that will be close to this proposed tank, which is a lot of homes.
Okay.
The end. And thank you for your good
Any other
work. I know
questions
it can't be the most
before we
fun you've
go?
had all night.
Members, any questions?
I don't have actually a question. One thing though, I do want for the record, and Mike, if you misunderstood my question to Tim earlier, I just wanted to clarify because I don't want it to be perceived that Tim didn't do something that I asked him to do. At no time did I actually ask him to include the Chartier piping in the report. I simply asked him if it was a viable option. And again, not arguing the point.
It's semantics.
It's semantics, but I want it officially in there because I don't want the report to reflect that Tim didn't do something I asked him to do.
But the answer to that was, yes, there were viable options, if I recall.
There may be viable options.
And again, Mike,
Yeah, I get
just
it.
like Jamie said, and I'm gonna say this, all we're doing here today, at the risk of being redundant, all we're doing today is voting on to accept the report. There are gonna be so many rounds of diplomacy that you guys can go to the selectmen directly, talk about the impact of residential impact on property values and so forth. And I think that this board, and being the longest ranking member and being here in '08 and doing this, I will tell you now, it has always been and always will continue to be at the forefront of this board's concern, the impact that you on your neighborhood. It always has been, and it always will be, and we have made it abundantly clear throughout this report and the letter that Jamie put together. One last question,
Okay,
or comment.
and you were talking about going to the selectmen, what exactly is the process?
Okay.
Because it is self-funding, right? So you don't have to go to town meeting or
Oh, no, we
borrow.
do.
No,
No, it's absolutely, because it's still a borrowing, so you still have to borrow, and it's, it's just the water has to pay it back. So any borrowing still goes to town
Okay, so
meeting.
you don't save it up and wait till you have enough and then do a tank. You borrow and then pay it back through.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, it would take us a really long time to save that.
I mean, it probably
So
take.
that's the whole
Yeah,
point. You
you're-
have selectmen's meetings, then you have a town meeting.
Well, that's what I wanted to know, what
got-
exactly, the
it's-
town meeting and a ballot, because we'd be borrowing
don't think it's
all
a
of
ballot.
that.
I don't think it's a
No.
ballot, because it's not
Borrowing's not- it's not a debt exclusion.
or override.
Like the public safety facility is
Well,
a
you
debt
have-
exclusion. It's just a different way to bring in income.
It depends on what they decide to do.
Like an
Depends on
override is
what else
different than a
I-
debt
it-
exclusion, a debt
it can
exclusion is
be-
different than a
Right, it-
borrowing, so.
I don't believe that the cost is enough that it would be a debt exclusion. But it depends on where we are with the cap at that point, too.
Right, depends
So-
where we are at the cap and what, and other things, like one of the things is that we've got a great bond rating now because we haven't come close to our debt exclusion amount.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's reasons to put it over the cap and under, and those are for financial purposes.
But yes,
Exactly.
so it's a lot, I mean, that all kind of is outside of really even where.
Right,
like,
but it's nice to know what the process is.
Right, so it would be,
Yes.
yeah, after the
Excellent
master plan, and then it would go into, all right, this is where we would end up having to have meetings about, the master plan meetings about about what priority one of the plan is, and then it would be going to, all right, let's talk about what work we would need to do as far as, because Tim had even recommended doing the, and I think on either site, we would have to do it, what at the vantage point was it looked like from different spots, and, driving down 495 everywhere, so there's a lot of stuff that would have to run into it before we then could even, so we need money for that.
Well, and for the
And
last
then
few
money
big
to
projects,
build
we've
it.
had a big, for the golf course, for the public safety meeting, we had committees that included neighbors and people directly impacted. So something like that might be.
Yeah, they
for
might do that.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, Main Street's the other one,
Absolutely.
where then neighbors are actually in the meeting, in the committee, helping make a decision. And I think that the town's found that that's a much more reasonable way to go at these big things. It's worked past, we tried to do something different with Main Street, and it didn't work. When that happened, then it got people's support, and they made a decision that people liked a lot better. So,
Okay.
All right, great. Any other comments from the board on this? Mark? So I think somebody just have to make a motion to accept the report and file our recommendation. Unless anybody, and if you want, we can make it as amended. No, because I think the stuff that Mike just gave us for the, yeah, we can do that. We can do the cover letter, we'll include the cover letter and the revised resident comments and my coordinates to include those in the final.
As amendments.
As amended.
this, yes.
So Mike, I don't know if you heard that, but we officially just agreed to put your comments and the cover letter in as amendments on the report. Appendix amendments, whatever the hell you want to call them. I swore on camera. By the way, can you do some airbrushing?
Okay. So that was so moved by Jim. That's what you moved.
Drink an official motion?
No.
Well, he
No.
did. He just agreed with what you. So you kind of made the motion.
You want to make a motion to accept this
Park
report
Corporation.
as is with those amendments in it?
Okay, second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No? The ayes have it. It's unanimous. And really quickly, I know Sue had some minutes from the last meeting. Obviously, y'all saw my comments. Do you want to make a? I think the parents suggesting is maybe make an actual roll call vote on recommending the selection. Oh, sure. I'll take care of
You gotta talk up.
You want me to write down the names of who voted?
No, so you had a 4-0 vote to accept the report. And then the question is should you vote, or do you want to, as a group, vote to recommend that the selectmen continue to pursue Park Central?
Yeah. I think she's probably right. She probably got that.
Absolutely, and I want this on the camera. Absolutely. So loud enough for everybody to hear this.
So it's a second vote. It's a second vote that'll be in his cover letter that the board voted blah, 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 blah.
How would you like to word that?
So I'll entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Selectmen.
Do you want to make the motion official?
Well, I can entertain it, then you can move it.
Okay.
And then, oh, I'm just thinking
You can just so move.
It's a path of least resistance.
Yes, she's having trouble hearing you.
I'm trying to wordsmith this live,
On the
right?
fly.
On the fly. So I'll entertain a motion to recommend to the selectmen to consider negotiating a parcel of land on the Park Central development for the purposes of a water storage tank,
As an alternative site?
as an alternative site.
Can you say that again, please?
Can we play that back?
So I'll entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Selectmen to consider negotiating for a parcel of land at the Park Central development area for the purposes of a water storage facility, tank,
As an alternative site.
as an alternative site.
Okay.
I will absolutely second the motion.
Oh, you
No,
made the
you
motion.
so-
made
so
the
move
motion.
it.
So move the motion?
Now we need a second. Second is Jimmy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, so the ayes have it. Or no?
All right, so that'll just be in the cover letter, and we'll just,
And
we'll post the final version of taking all the red lines off and
Right.
taking everything else off the
and
site
these
that
two-
has to do
and
with
the
this.
two things that
Yep.
I'll add.
Except
Once I get
this
the,
new
well, let me
amendment.
get the letter. I'll try to do the letter in the next couple of days.
That's fine. When we get, because the selectmen probably won't even talk about it for, they've got, that, right. We haven't
So,
even talked about that, the truck thing yet.
two other super minor bits of business. Council entertain a motion to approve the May 1st meeting minutes. I took a look at them, Sue, very kind, so some of my comments, but I think they look good.
Second.
Who moved to it?
He moved it. Cindy's gonna second it.
I'm making the motion.
I'm entertaining one to try to make it
Right.
quick.
Make the motion. There you go. Point of parliamentary procedure. Go ahead.
All those-
Usually the chair doesn't make the motion. That's why you have to move it.
That's why I'm saying I
Move it.
entertain, that's why I say I entertain
So
it, so
move.
that someone else can.
Okay, so let's vote.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the ayes have it, unanimous, 4-0.
Yeah, when Mark is chair, he
And
always
the
moves.
final smidge of business is, it's like Christmas. Every year, we get to take a look at the rules and regulations of the transfer station. So we were looking at June 5th, if people were available. Monday night?
Is that Monday?
Yeah. Park it out a little bit, because I think the town clerk may want to come. Yeah, 7 o'clock.
Yeah, you don't have to.
Oh, yeah, you don't have. So is that date all right? Right. So June 5th, we'll meet in,
We can
to
do
go over the
transfer.
the annual transfers.
Actually, you know what, while we're at it, we can, because we were talking about discussing just the transfer station as a whole, anyway, that is for one meeting, in terms of updating or anything, so talk about,
Okay.
so it'll be a transfer station night.
Now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
What time do we meet?
Look at that. I only took
we're like a
3 or 4
well-oiled
votes.
machine
Well-oiled
now.
machine. Okay.
Do we do 7?
Yeah.
So,
So we voted.
7's on the 5th.
Voting
7th
to
on the
adjourn.
5th.
Oh, Sue, excellent point. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Oh, yeah, I got it.
So we adjourned.